Good evening, welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the show tonight, what is the actual cost of manufacture of a vaccine? Are COVID vaccines presently overpriced? What exactly are input costs? How much are royalty prices? Why is one vaccine more expensive than another? Ultimately, pricing lies at the heart of vaccine distribution and equity, not just in India but around the world, particularly in this COVID context. Why is Covaxin as priced, highly priced in private facilities now, among the most expensive vaccines in the world, top 5 according to some estimates? Why is that the case? Wasn't a made in India vaccine actually meant to be much cheaper? Or is this all profiteering, which vaccine manufacturers, not just necessarily in India but around the world, are doing? But first, let's take a look at what goes into making a vaccine. There are a lot of common factors which go in, and this is all in the Indian context. In speaking to pharma experts, this is what we've learned. 32.5% of the manufacture of any typical vaccine in India has a raw material cost, packaging cost, and variable costs. For example, overheads which need to be sustained in operating a plant, irrespective of whether or not you're actually manufacturing anything. So there are overheads if you have a plant. There are fixed costs as well. So that's about 10%. So 32.5% is what a manufacturer needs to spend as far as that is concerned. Then there is marketing. Marketing overheads are also very large, 32.5% approximately. Why you would ask? These aren't just advertisements. It could be, but this also is how pharma companies educate healthcare workers and doctors and inform people about the administration of their vaccine. Then there's a distribution chain. There's a distributor. That distributor has to be paid. There's a retailer who has to be paid as well. By retailer, I mean a stockist, a shop. So all of that adds up to a final price. Over and above this final price, there is a profit margin, which in the case of Indian vaccine manufacturers has typically been at least 3 to 4 rupees a dose of vaccine. And so it's by no means something which doesn't give you a profit. It certainly does. But now let's take a look at the price of some of the vaccines in the COVID context. And does anything justify this sort of price? Sinopharm is the most expensive. It's Chinese. Pfizer and then Covaxin is the third most expensive at 1,410 rupees. This, of course, is not the price at which the government is acquiring it, but this is the price in which it's going to be available according to the new prices announced yesterday, including a charge to hospitals, I believe, of 1,410 rupees. That seems incredibly high. In fact, it's even higher than Moderna. It's higher than Sanofi, Johnson & Johnson, certainly Covishield as we know. And then the bottom part, if you look at Biological E and what they are planning to come out with, perhaps even next month at 200 to 250 rupees, if this price is correct, it's going to be an absolute world beater. The question is it something that's safe? Is it going to work? We assume at this stage that it is. Well, joining us on the program now to look at costs and to see if there is something called making a profit, which obviously is not anything anybody can disagree with in a free market economy, but then there is profiteering in a pandemic scenario. We are joined by Dr. K.V. Balasubramaniam. He's the former MD of Indian Immunologicals. Malini Isola is co-convener of the All India Drug Action Network. And Mr. Rajinder Suri also joins us. He heads a panel which looks at the distribution of vaccines to many parts of the developing world. Dr. Balasubramaniam, let me come to you first. When one says that a Covaxin or any of the other drugs in that list cost well over 1,000 rupees, how much does it actually cost to make these vaccines in India?
Yeah, thank you, Vishnu, for having me on the show, and it's really my pleasure to be here. Before I address your question, I thought I should quickly cover what are the basic cost drivers of a vaccine, which is a complex pharmaceutical product. Now, you have different technology platforms. In the COVID case, there are about 6 technology platforms. So depending on the technology platform you choose, you will have a cost structure. And then you come to the development cost, both from research and for the preclinical and clinical studies. And then you have the manufacturing investments to be made for the kind of capacity you're planning. What is important and a very significant component is the scale of manufacture and the yields that you could get. And then when you supply to the institution market, the vial presentation makes a lot of difference. We all know that a multi-dose presentation is much cheaper compared to a single dose presentation. And then you have the distribution and logistics costs in cold chain. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the marketing costs. Now, what I think before I come to the subject of costs of these two vaccines, what I would like to stress is that we have to strike a balance between affordability and the returns that a manufacturer can make on his investments. Now, when you look at the COVID vaccines which are supplied to the government, and we quickly run through these 7 factors that I listed, you will realize that there is not really a case for such high prices. I'll explain why, and I'll try and do that very quickly. The technology platform for these 2 vaccines are fairly well-established technology platforms. It's only that the virus for which you're doing is quite different, both for Covishield and Covaxin. And in terms of development costs, we know that they're not very significant, both for the clinical trials and for the research and development. In Covishield case, it's technology which was developed by the Oxford University. And both these vaccines have got emergency use approval, so they haven't run the full length of the
Right, but specifically, sir, if you can tell us about the costs, is there anything that justifies the cost?
Well, I did mention I was to take you very quickly through that, and I don't think it does, because the government is presently buying around 150 rupees a dose, and my estimates, put the cost for Covishield at around 17 rupees a dose, because all things considered. Also that they are working on a brownfield facility, they repurpose their plant, they don't incur the distribution and marketing costs, while presentations are in 10 and 20 dose, and the volume is humongous. The vaccine costs are largely determined by your scales of operation. It's largely a fixed cost business. You mentioned about the raw material cost being 35%, but if your volume goes up, the raw material cost itself will be a major cost. The overheads get absorbed over the large volumes that you have.
Okay,
so I think
let me just go across to Malini, because we have a fixed amount of time. I want to get in as many reactions as I can. Malini, the bottom line is, again, is there any clarity on how much our Indian vaccine manufacturers are actually spending? I know that there is a certain amount of money in the case of development, in the case of those companies which are developing their own vaccine, and there is a certain amount of money associated with licensure and then royalties and things like that. But after all of that, what is the scale of profit, generally speaking?
So Vishnu, let me answer that by taking you through a slightly broader perspective. So even though we're currently experiencing scarcities in vaccine, nothing is really going to stop India from becoming a manufacturing hub of vaccines globally. Any industry observer would attest to the fact that the capacity is being built within the industry for vaccine production. And this is not just for a couple of vaccines, but we're talking about a variety of vaccines across different technology platforms. And not only is the introduction of new vaccines tied to price, but also the onboarding of these production capabilities in the industry. So now we know that there has always been a price differential between imported products and locally manufactured ones. We see this very frequently with medicines, medical devices, variety of health products. But India has always played a role in supplying low-cost medicines and vaccines to the rest of the world. And the point is that we don't have to actually compare what wealthy countries are willing to pay for vaccines. The first priority of the government needs to be towards the Indian public,
right,
and optimizing the use of public resources. And for that, the vaccines that are and will continue to be manufactured in India, it is possible to discover the cost of production, and we should be able to procure them at fair rates. So there are different kinds of production that is happening in India and will be taking place. So first is by the company that has either developed the vaccine or has the rights to make the vaccine. And secondly, there is also a layer of contract manufacturing through which we can very easily get the price. So we know that Sputnik V is going to be produced in large quantities in India. And then also you just, quoted the biological vaccine price. I believe that is actually for 2 doses, not even 1. And so we would easily be able to discover the price, if not, if you, and that's going to be pretty easy to do. But once we also start exports, what we actually need to do is lead the world in disrupting the vaccine prices globally and providing them at affordable prices.
So if Bio-E, Malini, sorry to interrupt, comes in at that prices, and that price of 200 to 250, you're mentioning is for 2 doses. If it is for 2 doses, this would be hands down the cheapest vaccine in the world. It would start approaching the price of, many of the other vaccines which India manufactures and sells at very little prices to UNICEF and the like. Therefore, would the entire structure not collapse? Would this pyramid, would this high rise of vaccine and their prices not collapse because of competition?
I think what I'm trying to say is that that's just a matter of time. It should collapse. There should be, a reduction in the prices, and that will probably happen in India. But we should also lead the charge at the global level, because we should be the ones that actually provide affordable vaccines to the rest of the world, which none of the other countries have done. You've just showed a chart where the Chinese vaccines are some of the most expensive vaccines in the world. And they are based on traditional technology platforms.
Yeah. One moment, I want to go across to Mr. Suri. Mr. Suri, when you hear this entire debate, and you've got 2 experts over here. Mr. Balasubramaniam has been with the industry for decades. And it's a problem not just in India, but around the world, the grossly inflated price of vaccines. And you speak for developing countries and the initiative to get as many people vaccinated as possible. When can this truly happen? Because there are dozens of African countries now where there has been no meaningful vaccination at all. And ultimately, it comes down to one thing, price, right? So what are your views about this, the entire price issue?
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me for this session. I know Dr. Bala very well, and I have a huge respect for him. He has been a stalwart in the industry, of course. So, first of all, let me tell you that I share a lot of views of both the honorable speakers on the panel. In terms of affordable cost of the vaccine and, huge volumes that we should be able to generate and supply to the whole world. Having said that, I think there are certain fundamentals which one has to understand. First of all, I'll take you back to the slide which you shared in the opening, where we were talking about the pricing of various brands, including the imported products.
Okay, sure, we'll put that up,
Yeah. So the point is, what are we comparing? The apples have to be compared with apples.
Right. Let's change that graphic. The other one. Let's bring up the one with prices. Carry on, Mr. Surya.
Yes. No, if you are comparing a price of a Moderna or a Pfizer, which they are supplying to government of US, and then you compare a price of Covaxin, which is the capped price to a private hospital, I think these are 2 different things that we are talking about. So we should be comparing apple to apple, and what is our price to government of India is 150 rupees versus 2,000 rupees or 1,400 rupees, which is maybe less than 1/10 or 1/15 of the price. So this is very important to understand that we are comparing each other. Now, second thing is that have we developed a novel vaccine in India earlier? It is very easy to say that the development of cost in India is lower because we are talking about quality of vaccines and quality of lives. So quality of life of an Indian citizen is as important as it is in the US. So I am protecting the lives of the citizens.
Right.
And for that, if we start asking a question that what should be the price to protect the life? Now, consider a case where a very close kith and kin is, he attracts COVID. So what happens? All of us start running to the top of the hospitals, trying to get the bed at any cost, get the remdesivir, get oxygen, I'm just trying to say, what is the cost of saving that life?
Yeah.
And here you are saving a life well in advance, without any complexities, without any complications, at much cheaper the cost.
No, I get that point, and I think anything else, the entire process of vaccination is so very important. Let's hope it picks up. We've only been able to touch the surface of this. I'm afraid I'm out of time. But earlier today, I did speak to Thomas Suni, the Director General of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, to get a perspective of where big industry actually stands on the issue of pricing. Here's what he told me. Well, joining us now to talk about the importance of vaccination, vaccine distribution, not just in India but around the world, a very special guest. Thomas B. Sweni is the Director General of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. Now, it's great to have you at a time when the focus on vaccines is perhaps the dominant theme around the world. But there are some who believe that the biggest problem we now face in terms of dissemination of vaccines is the cost of the vaccines themselves, which brings me to my first question. Have global pharma companies made unjust profits from COVID vaccines?
Thanks first for having me, and the answer to your question is I don't believe. When I look at the economic forecast from IMF, OECD and others, we see light at the end of the tunnel. We actually see our economies are starting to come out of the pandemic, and it is not least to the triumph and success of science. When I look at the investments made in public-private partnerships, then I really believe that the amazing success of having not one but several safe and highly effective vaccines within less than a year of the pandemic is amazing. When you look at actually pricing of the companies, innovative companies really see this as business not as usual. The price, for example, in rich countries is pretty similar to what one pays for seasonal flu vaccine. But when you look at the importance of a COVID-19 vaccine, it is truly important and truly high value. And pretty much all the companies like Pfizer, BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Oxford, Johnson & Johnson and Moderna, they committed to tiered pricing, which means they do charge lower price to middle income and to low income countries, and in most instances in low income countries it is for cost.
Right, but Pfizer and Moderna are simply not available in the large number of developing countries in the world. Besides anything else, the carriage of the vaccines in hot countries is very, very difficult. That neither has there been any a lower price band for Moderna or Pfizer which has been announced. So would you say that the best and most efficacious vaccines are reserved for rich countries that can afford them?
They shouldn't be, and we have recently seen at the G20 Health Summit in Rome a couple of weeks ago, there was clear announcements from Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson to commit to supplying 3.5 billion doses to middle and low income countries over the next 18 months, including significant amounts of doses to COVAX. Now, what you said is one of the challenges, in particular of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine at the beginning, was concern about, do you need to invest in ultra cold chains when you expect to have vaccines which are easier to handle, easier to use? Mm-hmm. We have on the one hand see that stability tests have shown that you can to some extent loosen the insistence on ultra cold chains. But we have also seen that actually the hope for alternative vaccines have been delayed. They are not coming.
Right.
And that's why we clearly need this mRNA vaccine as one of the solutions, not just in rich countries, but across the world, because we are not safe until everyone is safe.
And, this brings me to my last question. India and South Africa at the World Trade Organization are pushing for a halt on intellectual property rights and patents for the COVID period and for COVID drugs. Now, that obviously flies in the face of what big companies and big pharma want, which is to sell and to obviously make a profit. But in a situation like this, isn't there merit in the argument that the formula from companies needs to be taken and vaccines need to be distributed to the entire world at the minimum cost, if not entirely free?
Now, we saw from the beginning, we knew this was a colossal challenge to vaccinate the world. We knew pre-COVID-19 global vaccine capacity was 5 billion doses. This year we need 10 billion doses just for COVID-19. Therefore, from the beginning, back to March 2020, companies started to get into voluntary licensing agreement, up to almost 300 partnership agreements, more than 200 of them involving technology transfer, many of them with Indian companies like Biologically, like Serum Institute, Bharat and others. Therefore, companies are doing that on the basis of their trust and faith in a legal framework, which does include IP. If an IP waiver would, really have any impact on additional doses this year, we would really struggle to explain our concern about it. Every expert I consulted agrees right now the problem is trade barriers such as Defense Production Act in the US. The problem is actually the scarcity of raw materials, the giant plastic bags you need, filters, lipids. The problem is that companies are doing whatever they can do already now to maximize production. IP waiver would be a distraction now, would not add doses now, but would send a really bad signal for future pandemic preparedness, where you do need to rely on the willingness of companies to invest in innovation, such as they're doing right now to address the variants, to already now invest in developing booster shots.
All right, Thomas Swainey, Director General of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. Lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, as we wrap up this program, a quick look at some of the petrol and diesel prices across the country. Petrol is near 102 rupees a litre in Mumbai. Just look at the prices of petrol, which have really shot up now over the last 1 month. Petrol rates are above 90 rupees, 95 rupees a litre across metros in the country. Diesel has now crossed 91 rupees a litre in Chennai. The price differential between diesel and petrol, which used to be very sizable, is certainly not that anymore. 91 rupees a litre in Chennai. Petrol is at 106.64 rupees a litre. Just look at this. This has been now for the last couple of days, we've been tracking this. Some parts of Rajasthan are actually seeing the highest prices of petrol. And Ganganagar now for the second consecutive day is leading that pack. As you can see over there, 106.64 rupees a litre in Ganganagar in Rajasthan. Parts of Maharashtra also are seeing the prices of petrol shoot up. For example, Parbhani in Maharashtra, which is at 104 rupees 10 paise a litre of petrol. So extremely high prices in Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Some parts it varies from town to town, city to city. This is what the overall situation is as far as petrol, remember, and diesel. Petrol 101 rupees and 76 paise in Mumbai. And Mumbai also has, among all of the other metros, the highest diesel price at 93.85, and followed by Chennai, which is also very high, certainly in terms of petrol prices. So there you have it, a quick look at the petrol and diesel prices, which have been skyrocketing in the last 1 month or so. We're out of time on this program. From all of us here, goodbye.